This is, well, you decide. This last night in San Diego, at the Occupy San Diego protest, they had a protester stand up and ask for a moment of silence for the White House shooter.
I think we should have a moment of silence in solidarity for the person that they said was from the Washington, D.C. Occupy, that maybe why did he feel a need to shoot the White House window today? So I think we should hold a moment in solidarity for the White House and for the guy that shot at the White House today. Occupy the police department!
Now, we get this audio video from our buddies at Newsbusters. We don't get this from the drive-bys. So this Looney Tunes out there in San Diego stands up, a moment of silence. Here, listen to this again. And I want you to, as you listen to this, I want you to imagine the outrage if some Tea Party gathering had expressed their solidarity with Gerald Lochner, who shot Gabby Giffords, with a moment of silence. I want you to imagine you'd still be hearing about it. I want you to imagine if a Tea Party gathering expressed their solidarity with this guy for shooting up the White House. The media would be all over it. The media doesn't want this kind of news out about who these people, the Occupy movement, are. Listen to this again.
I think we should have a moment of silence in solidarity for the person that they said was from the Washington, D.C. Occupy, that maybe why did he feel a need to shoot the White House window today? So I think we should hold a moment in solidarity for the White House and for the guy that shot at the White House today. Occupy the police department!
Moment of silence for the White House shooter and for the White House. No, that's real. It was last night in San Diego. That's not Saturday Night Live. No, it's not Comedy Central. It's not The Onion. It's not Scott. No, it's real. It's real. I want you to remember when the Tea Party had a meeting somewhere, and there was some guy running around with a gun, plainly visible, and the media went nuts. My God, look at that! The guy's got a gun. He's got a gun. Like Chris Matthews about busted a blood vessel. I'm just telling you, the Occupy Wall Street movement, inspired by Obama. They are being bought and paid for. They're being winterized by the SEIU. They're being winterized in various places by unions. The unions are paying to be able to keep them organized in the winter months. They are an arm of the Democrat Party. They are part of the Obama re-election campaign. Whether these doomcoffs in the movement know it or not, they are pawns like Mongo in Blazing Saddles, a mere pawn in the game of life. That's what these people are. Some of them, the organizers know. The others, the stragglers, pretty soon, because of the cold weather, they're going to have to go home. And I'll tell you when they're going to go home. They will go home next week in time to go to the blue light specials at Kmart and Walmart. By the way, speaking of heading home, oh yeah, listen to this. New York Times. A very sad New York Times. As new graduates return to Nest, economy also feels the pain. Like most of her friends, Hollis Romanelli graduated from college last May and promptly moved back in with mom and dad. As a result, Hollis Romanelli did not pay rent, nor a broker's fee or renter's insurance, for that matter. She also didn't buy a bed, a desk, a couch, a doormat, a mop, a new crockery set. How insulting to think that's what a woman would go buy. You got a female graduate here in the era of feminazism, and they're worried about the fact she didn't go buy a doormat, a mop, or a crockery set? And a woman wrote this, Catherine Rampell. How insulting. This is a story about how these new graduates are really not just harming themselves and how they're being harmed, but the whole economy is being harmed because they're not buying all this stuff for themselves because they're not earning any money. But I just find it hilarious that of all the things a female college graduate could be lamented for not being able to buy a mop, why not throw an ironing board in there? A crockery set? How about a fondue machine? I don't know what a crockery set is. I really don't know. I think it sounds like something you get at Williams-Sonoma. It's a crock is a pot. It's some kind of pottery. It's but it looks like pottery, right? Pottery could make a crockery set. Okay, Mr. Expert, then what? This is going nowhere. You don't slow cooker? A crockery set's a slow cooker? Okay, fine. I don't care. All I know is the New York Times unhappy that this female graduate can't go buy one. What do I care what a crockery set is? Nor did she pay the cable company to send a cable guy to set up her TV and internet. Nor did she pay a handyman to hang a newly framed diploma. She'd even buy adult beverages and snacks for a housewarming party. In other words, Ms. Romanelli, 22, saved a lot of money, but she deprived the economy of a lot of potential activity, too. Every year, young adults leave the nest, couples divorce, foreigners immigrate, roommates separate, all helping drive economic growth. So, cultural tumult. The New York Times is lamenting there's not enough cultural rot. Look at what they say drives the economy. Adults leave the nest. Couples divorce. Foreigners immigrate. Roommates separate. All helping drive economic growth when they furnish and refurbish their new homes. Yes, growing up does help, but I don't know where they think the divorce comes into this. Under normal circumstances, every time a household is formed, it adds about $145,000 to output that year as the spending ripples through the economy, estimates Mark Zandi, the chief. Have they just defined trickle down here? They've just defined trickle down here in the New York Times, which they excoriate. They hate trickle down. They say it doesn't exist. They just defined it here. But with the poor job market and the uncertain recovery, whoa, thought we were in an expansion. This chick at the New York Times is in for big trouble here. This story is a wreck because it's not following any of the templates of the drive-by media. My God, lamenting that a woman can't go out and buy a crockery set or a mop, lamenting the fact that there isn't divorce, lamenting the fact that foreigners aren't immigrating, that roommates aren't separating. Wow. With the poor job market and uncertain recovery, that's another thing. We're supposed to be in an expansion here. Hundreds of thousands of Americans like Hollis Romanelli and her boyfriend, by the way, who also lives with his parents, have tabled their moves. Even before the recession began, young people were leaving home later. Now the bad economy has tethered them there indefinitely. Last year, only 950,000 new households were created. By comparison, about 1.3 million new households were formed in 2007, the year the recession began, according to Mr. Zant. It did not begin in 2007. I mentioned this earlier. The recession began in 2008. But at any rate, Ms. Romanelli, who lives in the room where she grew up in Branford, Connecticut, said, "I don't really have much of a choice. I don't have the means to move out." Ms. Romanelli, who works as an assistant editor at Cottages and Gardens magazine, is one of the luckier boomerang children who found jobs and at least can start saving for their own place someday. As of last month, just 74% of Americans between 25 and 34 were working. It's perhaps no wonder that 14.2% of young adults are living with their parents. Among young men, 19% are living with their parents. But even some young people who can't afford to move out have decided to wait until getting on more solid footing. Prudence, not necessity, has kept them at home. Jay Bouvier, 26, has a full-time teaching physical education and health and coaching football, baseball job at a high school in Hartford near his parents' house in Bristol. He could rent his own apartment. After taxes, he makes about $45,000 a year, but he's decided not to. He says he will stay with his parents until he's saved enough to buy his own house. I have it pretty good at home. So close to my work, financially, I just feel like it's smarter for the long run to buy. It's like I pay rent, but to myself. What a deal it is, yes, but by not paying rent, of course, he has deprived a local landlord and a host of other local companies of some income. as well as whatever businesses those purveyors might have patronized further down the line. It's a phenomenon that John Maynard Keynes referred to as the paradox of thrift. Saving is good for the individual, but in mass can hurt the economy by reducing demand. These people continue to define trickle down and don't know it. Well, now they're lamenting that there's no trickling taking place in the economy because these selfish brats are staying at home and they're not buying their own mops and they're not buying their own crockery sets and they're not buying their own doormats and they're not renting their own places. Increased housing demand definitely has multiplier effects throughout the economy, but there isn't increased housing demand. So due to the lack of jobs, high debt, and the pull of the occupieds, college graduates who can't find jobs head back home to live with their parents. This has a impact all through the economy. So we're not creating new households. But yet the economy is expanding. Did you see that the other day? We told you the economy is, Bloomberg said the economy is expanding. And yet here's this story in the New York Times by Catherine Rampell about how bad it is out there. She concludes the actions of the young are self-perpetuating. Young people are reluctant to set off on their own until they have greater financial stability. But the economic conditions necessary to make them financially secure are difficult to achieve, while consumers like them are still too nervous to start making big purchases on housing or anything else. They have just written a story in the New York Times that could be subtitled, "Or Why We've Got to Defeat Obama." Why we've got to get rid of the Democrat Party is what this story really says. But it also, I left home on a wing and a prayer. Nothing was guaranteed when I left home. I left home at age 20 for $175 a week. There wasn't any thought of staying with mom and dad when you could get out. There wasn't any thought of it. When it was, you wanted to get out, spread your wings, freedom and all that. You didn't want to be dependent. You didn't want to be sponging off your parents. And you did. You absolutely lived in abject poverty to get on your own. Well, yeah, I did go back home. And in fact, they loved me coming back home because I'd been through this. I worked all through high school. I really didn't have the typical lazy, hazy days of summer life because I was working since I was 15. But nevertheless, wanted to get out and did for $175 a week. There was no guarantee. There wasn't any financial security. It was a radio job. I could have got canned in 2 weeks. Took a year, but I eventually found another one.